Thank you, Louise. The talk this morning is on inclusive design and really to focus on people's abilities, not to focus on people's disabilities, but to look at how, by focusing on the variety of abilities that different people have, we can design better spaces and products and interfaces, and how that can benefit people of, all sorts of people. Just a little bit about us. Some of you may know us, but we're a design practice based in Cambridge, and we have a specialty in workplace design, but we also work in various other sectors. Celia, I want to thank, who I think is listening in. She's in the picture upper right on the very left-hand side, and she helped put this presentation together. In fact, she put this presentation together. So I'm giving it, but she's done a lot of research into this as well. So thanks, Celia. We're very hands-on. You can see we're on site there installing furniture, putting in bespoke joinery. We kind of have our fingers in a lot of pies. We work according to the REBA plan of work. So we're certified architectural technologists, so we can do kind of architectural design work as well as kind of office fit out and space planning. Just a few examples of our projects. I thought you might like to see kind of what we do. We've done work in the residential sector. This is a house, a 1920s house that we refurbished. And as I said, we do a lot of work for the colleges and for the university. This project was shortlisted for an FX award, and it was done in conjunction with Niall McLaughlin Architects, and we did all the bespoke joinery and the interior design and the furniture supply. We're very involved in workplace design, and in fact, many of our staff really cut their teeth in workplace design. We're very good at space planning and dealing with multiple stakeholders and making offices now increasingly COVID safe, which is a whole nother topic. We also work in the healthcare sector. We're doing a little bit of work for Addenbrooke's Hospital right now. And obviously inclusivity is very important in that sort of setting. Some of you may be familiar with the term activity-based working. It's kind of a buzzword in interior design right now. And it's kind of the idea that there should be different places provided to people who have different needs or requirements or work habits. And the little chart on the right focuses in on mobility profiles. So mobility profile 1 is a kind of person that's quite sedentary and at their desk most of the time. 30% of the workforce is mobility profile 1. 41% of the workforce is mobility profile 2, which is, the timid traveler, sometimes moving around, but also staying at their desk quite a lot. And then mobility profile 3 is for the intrepid explorer. So 19% of the people are kind of going out a bit more, moving around away from their desk. And only 10% of the workforce is truly sort of mobile, mobility profile 4. So we're very used to planning offices to take into account the sort of different kinds of tasks people do. But we'd like you to look during this talk and in future about thinking about people's abilities as well as their tasks, and how to plan your office so that it works for the people and for the tasks. So what is an inclusive workspace? A top-level definition of an inclusive workspace would be one that provides equal access and opportunities regardless of variables such as age, gender, race, physical ability, and mental health. Some general barriers to a more inclusive workplace would be that there's a lack of awareness about the need for and the importance of inclusion. Those who are aware of the importance do not necessarily know where to begin or how to move forward. And naysayers are dismissive of the idea and say that it's impossible to cater for everyone's needs and wants. And I think some people also think that you can't achieve a beautiful aesthetic if you're also making it sort of inclusive, and that's something we really want to demystify. So I think the definitions are important in that we use the correct terminology when we're talking about universal design, accessibility, and inclusive design. Universal design and accessibility describe an end product, and it's an emphasis on how successful the product or service is in serving everyone universally. Universal design and accessibility guidelines are standards for spaces and products and services to include people with disabilities, whereas inclusive design shifts our focus from product to process, and it's a more human-centered design process that embraces diversity from end to end. While universal design and accessibility guidelines are valuable for auditing spaces and digital services, the guidelines are prescriptive, non-contextual, and don't account for emotion. So remember, it's the process and not the end goal that will certainly, and we will certainly not have all the answers. Humans are infuriatingly diverse and ever-changing, but that's no reason to not make the workplace better, more beautiful and accepting for all. So some principles of inclusive design are, to recognize exclusion. Exclusion happens when we solve problems using our own biases. So seek out exclusions as opportunities to create new ideas and inclusive designs. Learn from human diversity. Human beings are real experts in adapting to diversity. Inclusive design puts people at the center from the very start of the process. And fresh, diverse perspectives are the key to true insight. And I think this last one is really important. Solve for one and extend to many. Everyone has abilities and limits to those abilities. Designing for people with disabilities actually results in designs that benefit people universally. So what you might think of as constraints can be beautiful things. So for example, some of you may be familiar with the Oxo Cooking Tools, which are a classic example of great design that was inspired by disability. They're known for their ease of use, and the cooking tools were created by the founder, Sam Farber, because his wife struggled with some kitchen utensils given her arthritic condition. So they have kind of larger forms and easier to grab tools. On the digital front, autocomplete technology aimed to help the physically impaired type faster helps everybody. And when you think about ramp crossings that were perhaps originally put in for wheelchair users, they benefit now people with bikes and buggies. I think this slide is really helpful as well, and applies to a lot of us, that disability is context dependent. It's not just about a specific health problem or aging, but a person can be temporarily impaired too. It can also be based on your situation at a point in time. So for example, touch. Somebody could have one arm, but you could temporarily break your arm, or you could have a baby and you're not able to use your arms as easily. For example, with sight, you could be permanently blind, but you could have a cataract for a period of time that then gets removed, or you could just be a distracted driver. For example, with hearing, you could be deaf, but you could have an ear infection, or you could just be working in a really noisy environment where you can't hear. Speaking, you could be a nonverbal person, but you could temporarily have laryngitis or a heavy accent. So there's permanent, temporary, and situational things to consider here. And in our small company, we know a lot of people with disabilities. I myself had a problem with my hip for a while, and it really made me start being more aware of ramps, handrails, lifts in buildings. And now it's all sorted and I've kind of forgotten about it, but I think we all need to remember that we'll at least at some point be temporarily disabled. So the facts are that 22% of the population is disabled, and that's more than 1 in 5. 16% are of working age, and 10% of the population is neurodivergent. 16% of autistic adults are in full-time employment. So the most common disabilities are mobility, 57%, stamina, 38%, which includes breathing and fatigue, 28% dexterity, 16% mental health. So even for normal neurotypical people, at some point in life, at least 1 in 4 will experience some kind of mental health condition, such as anxiety, depression, or stress. And I think we're reading a lot about this in the press at the moment, but it is really true that there's all sorts of factors driving up stress levels in the workplace. And I think the current political and economic climate isn't helping. Brexit, but now we have COVID. Similarly, this kind of always-on culture puts additional pressure on staff to always be looking at emails, always be checking, having last-minute calls. And I think that having a good support strategy at work will ensure that employees feel that their employer cares about their mental health and encourages them to seek support if they do have a problem. So well-being and mental health are often sort of remedied by a sort of approach to a biophilic office or well-being in the office. And this is a really good example of a breathing wall at the Lend-Lease headquarters, which was designed by Hassel Architects. It has 5,000 plants in it. And health was at the heart of the design. The Lend-Lease aim was to encourage greater connectivity between leaders and people and to make health a real priority in all aspects of the workplace. So back to neurodiversity, you can see some examples of different sorts of neurodiversity here, but embracing neurodiversity and having an appreciation for how minds think differently might have insights that simply don't occur to the rest of the workforce. There's a huge benefit in hiring diverse talent, especially in a creative industry where we are always in need of new points of view, perspectives of thinking, and bringing life into that big idea. We're finding that some organizations are now actually really seeking out diverse abilities and gifts of neurodiverse people, not only to support diversity, but because it can bring significant performance advantages. Companies like Ernst & Young, software giant SAP Global, marketing agency Ogilvy and Mather, and law firm Linkletters are all recruiting and catering their workspaces through inclusive design and are achieving greater margins, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And they also enjoy the increased employee engagement and retention, arguably because employees see that every single person is valued. So what are some practical steps to getting involved with inclusive design? Perhaps include a group that you've previously excluded as part of your target audience. Each time we consider the needs of a new group of users whom we had previously excluded in our design, we make our product and service more inclusive than it was before. Or conduct contextual research to identify the problem. Contextual research methodologies drive empathy as you immerse yourself in the context and the environment of the user. It creates opportunities for you to see the world through a different lens. Collaborate with your target audience in the design process, and you could run inclusive workshops which allow the diversity of experiences and perspectives to build on each other. This opens the space for ideas and decisions that can only come through conversations. I think a myth about inclusion is the need to serve everyone. And obviously, this is an ideal end state, but that idea can be daunting and often leads to teams choosing to abandon the cause altogether, which is rather unfortunate. So it means thinking about diversity of our users from the start of any project and including them, users with a range of access needs in user research and testing. It involves making sure no one is excluded from using the tools, products, and services that we create. So 7 principles that apply not just to facility design, but also to products and environments in general. Equitable use, the design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. Flexibility in use, the design accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities, making things that are simple and intuitive to use, easy to understand. perceptible information, so the design communicates necessary information effectively to the user. While most facilities and offices are already designed to meet DDA standards through the well-known approved document Part M of the British regulations, as itself, it states, this only provides a baseline for accessibility in the built environment. So that's not what we're all aiming for, is to meet Part M, but we're trying to do better than that, or we can do better than that. British regulations, British standards, and the metric handbook, yeah, there are baselines and they're minimum, and they're not necessarily comfortable. So some more principles are tolerance for error. Design minimizes hazards and adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. Low physical effort. The design can be used efficiently and comfortably with a minimum of fatigue. Size and space and approach for use. Appropriate size and space is provided for approach, reach, manipulation, and use. I think we're all seeing people opening up their spaces a lot more and including a lot more space. And this is helpful for wheelchair users to have more turning radius, but it also helps with, you know, the spread of viruses to just have more space in between people. And doesn't it feel nicer not to feel so crowded? Bringing inclusive design to life. Designing for inclusion does not necessarily require costly upgrades or radical adjustments in workplace layout. In fact, modern office concepts are already leading the way. Examples of inclusive design are features you probably already experienced, such as door levers. So door levers are a lot easier to grab than a doorknob. For people who have kind of arthritis or problems with their hands. Flat panel light switches rather than small toggle switches that require dexterity. Easier to read large print equipment on control labels. Overheads and task light options. I mean, people increasingly want options in their lighting. Some people experience headaches and eye fatigue with too much light, and other people, you know, like more light. So it's about providing more options. Wider doors, hallways, and alcoves, so generous turning spaces, which not only look nice, but actually really work well. In the workplace also, we need to include quiet workspaces and environment controls for those that are sensitive to noise, light, heat, and cold. So today's office layouts are increasingly likely to offer choice, as we talked about activity-based working. But a person with ADHD, for instance, can simply choose the workspace that's best for them on that particular day. They don't need a special office set aside for people with special needs, because that tends to make people feel like an outsider. So greater focus on employee health and well-being is key to productivity, and brought features such as sit-to-stand desks, which I use myself, and I find it really great, especially when I had my hip problem. But I think it also keeps you standing up and having good posture, and keeps you moving a little bit so you don't feel so sluggish. But the other benefit for a sit-to-stand desk is that you can have quick meetings. You can have much quicker meetings standing up. So if somebody comes into your office and you're standing at your desk, they can just come over and share a screen together, and then that meeting can be a little bit more efficient. So clearly design features can appeal to people without disabilities. And that really is the best way to do it, is to try to design for people with all levels of abilities. And you'll surprisingly find that you've made a lot of people happy, not just the people with disabilities. So bringing inclusive design into life, some other small features can make a big difference, such as follow the closed fist rule. So, you know, we talked about lever handles, but push latches, side hinge doors, and other elements that can be operated with a closed fist. So, which means that everyone can have access. Provide lever handles, install doors that can be opened with an elbow or even the tip of your nose. I've never seen anyone open a door with the tip of their nose, but maybe. You know, just thinking about people with limited dexterity. or carrying a laptop or a cup of coffee. So invest in adjustable chairs and desks. I just spoke about that. Keyboard and computer supports. Think about the glare coming in from the windows as well, because that can really make an office environment more comfortable to have a little bit more solar control on the windows. Multi-height surfaces in communal areas such as kitchens and toilets also help. And thinking about wheelchair users being able to get their wheelchair underneath the counter so that it's open underneath. So here's a case study, which is Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme. This was designed by Woods Bagot to be completely disability accessible. So it has a lot of features, but when you look at it, it doesn't look like an institutional design. So it has flexibility with tables and chairs in a range of sizes and heights. It has a lot of foliage around to add a natural element to the interior, which is often people find very calming and aiding their concentration. Plenty of light envelops the space in a warm glow. So the architects worked with the DDA consultants to create this workspace, which really looks beautiful and open and clean, and it has a lot of space, traditional accessibility features like elevators and increased circulation for wheelchair users were at the forefront, but also elements like tactility and tone were also masterfully incorporated throughout the building. So things like the warm handrail, the wooden handrail, normally, you know, more often than not, you'd get a metal handrail, but the wood is just very tactile and warming and reassuring. So some of the main materials added richness, but they also provide this tactility, which enhances the space, especially for the visually impaired. So for example, in this collaboration area, a stainless steel mesh curtain acts as a sort of translucent screen device that divides up the space, but also lets in natural light and fresh air and doesn't block out the views. So they wanted something that you could run your hand through and know that there is a guide, but without having a solid wall. And this was the kitchen area. You can see the variable heights and the use of wood and the views to the outside and the daylight and the plants. They also used color. Blue and cool colors are thought to be naturally relaxing and encouraging focus and calm. So that was used in the open plan and workstation areas. And then warmer tones were used in the central kind of collaboration areas. And you can see also that there's a lot of contrast used, and contrast helps people with eyesight issues. So the darker door frames, the darker skirting, but helps define the planes, but it doesn't actually look like a DDA compliant space. It actually looks quite cool. So just leaving on a quote from Domino Risch, a workplace principal at Hassel, which is where Celia used to work before she works with us. And he says, "I now passionately believe that most of us that conceive and create the stage for people to work need to be much more aware of and sympathetic to the idea that one size doesn't fit all. But further, we need to be designing workplaces, and indeed all places, with a deep understanding and consideration of neurodiversity and the goal of greater inclusivity. We need to think more carefully about how the physical environment impacts not only our sense of well-being, both physical and mental, which are clearly incredibly important and much more commonly aspired to, but also for emotional, sensory, and neuro well-being, which must go far deeper than simply providing a pokey, quiet room for every 15 people or so. Humans tend to be infuriatingly diverse and ever-changing, but that's no reason not to try to make the workplace a better, more beautiful, and accepting place for a diverse range of people." So that's really it from me. And this is our contact details, and that's our little shop in Cambridge up behind Kettle's Yard. And we also, just to let you know, we've launched an online furniture shop recently called EWAP, and that's a sort of screenshot of the homepage. So thanks for listening, and I hope that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eve, for going through that. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Lots of information in there, and I particularly like the slide with the black skirting boards. Actually, yeah, something that you never generally think of. I think I'll get in first. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I think I'll get in first with a question and ask: have you had anybody asking for things that you've not been asked for before due to COVID? Say, are there things that are coming out that people are considering? I've seen some stuff about, for example, is it good to sit near a window that opens, or is it not good because the air may blow any potential viruses into the office, or is it good because that person near the window gets fresh air? I know there's a lot of discussions going on in this area.
Yeah, I think people are really focusing a lot of attention onto their outside spaces as well. So I think landscape design and bringing the inside out is really important right now. Not just for COVID, but also just for mental well-being and relaxation and fresh air. And it's just good to move around. But yes, we're getting asked to go back into offices that we've designed before and space desks out and put some acrylic screens in, which I don't really think is the answer. But I think if it gives people confidence to go back to work, then I think it does work well. We're putting little shelves with hand sanitizer into offices and key places. But I think, yeah, openable windows are really good to have the windows open. I think it gives people confidence if nothing else, but I'm sure fresh air has to be better than recirculated air. And I think services engineers are probably doing a lot of hard graft right now on this topic.
Yes, I'll bet. I did wonder about just biometric or something similar, entrance doors or even doors around the building where you don't have to even touch a handle. I wonder whether that will be a forthcoming trend. So I don't know.
Actually, one of the offices we just looked at making COVID safe, we did just that. We put door stops in a lot of the doors, so the doors were hold the doors open, so people don't have to touch the doors as much. I think.
Yeah, and then of course you've got to mesh in with fire regulations, haven't you? Because I know if we prop doors open at the Houser Forum, we get into trouble.
Yeah. Maybe I think they have to be tied in with the fire alarm system.
Yeah, not easy. Does anybody else have any questions? Please put them in the chat, or you can ask to unmute yourself.
Or Celia might want to say something. I see she's listening.
They're being very quiet.
Sandra Noise, though, you can hear me or not?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Yeah, I've had all sorts of problems, see me or not, all sorts of problems with relatively poor, inexpensive PC screens, causing all sorts of eye issues, and have finally given up on with the poorer ones and spent quite a lot of money on an expensive screen. That's made an enormous difference. No more headaches, no more eye strain. Can do things of an evening, which I haven't been able to do for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the right technology and to know how to work it, and especially with all the Zoom calls that everybody's doing, it's really exhausting. I think everybody's saying it's super exhausting, and I think people are just working more in a weird way, because even Louise, you were saying it's so easy to put a webinar together, where before, if we were to have a talk like this, everybody would have to drive to the meeting zone, you'd have to book the room, you'd have to bring in tea and coffee. And now it's so easy to just have meetings left, right, and center. And all that time in between where you might be traveling to a meeting or packing your bag, you're not doing. And it's just like, I've got a Zoom call, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1. There's no breaks in between. So I think we all have to think about giving ourselves breaks. But yeah, sorry, back to the screen and the font size. My eyesight isn't getting any better as I get older. So I'm looking
We're all with you
on all my devices now.
Yeah, it's interesting about the screens though, isn't it? Just because I wonder if people sometimes just buy a one size fits all kind of thing. I mean, I know designers and things quite often have different screens, don't they, or multiple screens, so they can work better. But it's something I would not have necessarily thought of. And I'm actually sitting here staring at my laptop screen with my shonky eyes. So it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there's 4 of us. We're all at school together, and we're all swapping notes on WhatsApp. And 2 of us have got eye issues.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other 2 won't use one's a journalist, will not use his PC beyond 5:30 of an evening.
Really interesting. Yeah. So that comes back to the human-centered design again, doesn't it? Which we started off with.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have a cutoff time, isn't it, with technology? And I purposely leave my phone downstairs in the kitchen when I go up to bed. I know a lot of people take their phones to bed with them, and I just think that it's not good to be staring at a screen all the time, and especially when you're trying to fall asleep. I don't know what people do, but I mean, I make the mistake of sometimes sitting at my dining room table too late doing work, which is kind of the same thing. But it's learning to switch off, isn't it? Not just because the technology is there, not just to work the whole time, but learn.
Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Yeah. On the chat, Stacey has asked, what about workspaces at home? Have you got any hints and tips for making those good for work and for health?
Yeah, I think it must be hard for people with smaller apartments and houses to find a good place to work. But for me, I think it's really important to define your work zone and have it separate from your living zone so you can switch off. I mean, that's the advantage of going into work. You go into work, you do your work, and then you go home to relax. But if our homes become our work zone, then how do you relax? So I think if you have the luxury of a spare room and you can use that as an office, or if you don't use your dining room that much, use that as an office, I think that's got to be a good thing. I just really love my sit to stand desk. I think it keeps you awake, it keeps your back strong. It opens up your lungs. Somebody told me that when they have an important phone call to make, they like to stand up because it kind of opens up their lungs. And so now I do that. If I have an important call to make, I'll put my desk up and I'll stand up when I make it rather than sit down. I think good lighting is really important. Good task light. I have a nice little light that the head kind of swivels down but also swivels up. So sometimes I need the light right on my work, but other times I just want a diffuse light if I'm working on my screen. Sitting near a window, of course, is always nice with a view to the garden. And a good chair. I think a really good chair is important. People sit on their dining room chairs and sit on their sofas, and it's got to be bad for your back to kind of be slouching into a soft sofa when you're trying to work. So finding a nice chair that doesn't look too officey to have at home.
It takes a bit of practice though, doesn't it? Even when we were sent home in a hurry in the middle of March, I think I've had 3 different locations, and I'm now in the back bedroom, but I experimented with a standing desk, and it was literally an old bookcase, an old bookshelf, sorry, on 2 planks. So it didn't look pretty, but it did kind of do the job. But it took quite a long time to find a comfortable workstation where I wasn't getting pins and needles in my right hand from using the mouse too much and stuff. But it did take a lot of practice. But I'm lucky I do have a spare room, I guess, to be able to have these things. We've got a question from
Celia here. Sorry, I'll just add to that. Hi. I'll just add to that because we need to think that at the office we're not always seated at our desk for the whole day, and depending on what we do, we don't need to be sat at our desk at home either. And actually moving around our home is a very simple thing. We can, if we're going to be checking emails, we can switch. I mean, if you have a laptop, obviously you can switch to the sofa. Sometimes you have a bar top in your kitchen where you can be standing at, or at your kitchen table. Just the variety of swapping where you're sitting and where you're working within your home is going to keep you much more alert. And in terms of posture, I mean, everyone knows that sitting is the new smoking. So adding that movement to the day while you work is also something else to keep your mind on. It helps to have a designated desk. Studies by Leesman report suggest that people that have a designated space find working at home much more beneficial. But just bearing in mind that sitting at your desk in the same place isn't good. So yeah, move around your house depending on the task that you're doing at that particular moment.
That's interesting, because it comes back to I think it was one of the earlier slides about the mobility profiles of employees as well. And I thought, oh, I'd probably fit into, number one, I just go in, sit at my desk, sit there the whole time, but you don't actually have to be like that. And I guess your design could encourage people to move around as well. So for their own health, rather than just sort of sitting in one space the whole day. But I thought the mobility profiles was an interesting way of looking at your employees.
Yes.
There's a question on the chat from Heather. Can you give some examples of choice of workspace that can be offered?
Well, choice of workspace, I guess you can have quiet more in an office design, for example. Some people, like in this photo that's up, there's a big table in the middle, and that's a kind of collaborative space. But you can see on the left, there's somebody working in a quieter area that's kind of partially screened off. It's just providing different kinds of environments within the workplace. And maybe some rooms are a bit darker. You use a darker paint color even to make them a little bit cozier and warmer. So giving that variety, maybe some areas more slouchy sofas, and some areas I quite like. If I had a big office, I'd like to have one meeting room that actually had a stand-up meeting table. Because why do you need to come into a meeting room, sit down, your typical meeting, everybody gets a cup of coffee, they come straggling in, there's cookies on the table or whatever, and you waste 10 or 15 minutes, and it's not really great. Once you're sat down, you kind of loathe to get back up again. But if you had a standing meeting room, or one that was variable height, I think that would help offices have kind of quicker, more efficient, maybe less meetings. So just giving different heights and different room environments, I think, where you can even put, even think about the acoustics of a space. Different rooms can have harder acoustics, and other rooms can have sort of softer acoustics, and all that variety makes a place feel less institutional, but actually helps people in choosing where they feel more comfortable. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, I mean, in the workplace, just to add there, it's Celia here again. In the workplace, we commonly have a kit of parts that make up the workspace. So for activity-based working, for example, you just need to understand what each employee, the tasks that each employee takes, or each team takes. So, and then you employ a kit of parts essentially throughout the space. So like Eve was saying, you've got your general workstation, but then you could have team tables, project areas, you've got your sit to stand areas, your whiteboards, large rooms, you've got your small quiet rooms, you've got your phone booths as well. So it's just understanding what your team needs and providing all those different areas. I mean, a very extremely popular is the diner booth, where it can easily become a workplace, a quiet workplace, or you can ad hoc meeting with 2 or 4 colleagues, and yeah, so it is understanding what the team needs to perform a task, and making sure that you have all those different spaces available for them in the right proportion.
I think that's really important, because I think people throw around this, they think if they design an office that just looks really eclectic and has a bit of this and a bit of that, it's a cool office. But actually, you need to look at exactly what Celia said. We normally undertake sort of user group surveys to find out how people operate before we would design somebody's office. And it's something like 84% of young people actually are the people that have the jobs that they're sitting at their desk. The concentrated jobs, you think of it like maybe a design person or an architect's office like I work in. It's usually the senior people who are out and about meeting clients, but the CAD technician needs to really focus on what they're doing, and they need to stay in one place really, because they might have a big screen, they might have lots of paper on their desk, and it's not really that efficient casting around looking for a desk every morning in that role. And I think organizations really need to employ designers that understand how that works, and not just use it in a sort of uneducated way.
We have another question on the chat from John Greaves. Are any of your larger customers looking at reorganising their floor space to create social distance collaborative space for when staff come in, while many are looking to be working from home a large percentage of the week? Sorry, I didn't read that very well. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, people are asking us to come back and evaluate their workspaces. I think statistically in London, it's only like 11% of the workforce is back at work. We're hoping that's going to increase. And I've certainly found, I'm fortunate, I have a smallish office, and because everyone was working from home, I started coming into the office, and now slowly people are starting to come into our office. And I find, well, we're doing design work, so we need to look at samples, we need to draw together and look at layouts. I find it's much more efficient, to be looking at things together. It takes a lot more planning to work remotely in what we do. But we've had Zoom calls with clients walking around, their office space or their house through the camera. We've done that too. I'm probably not really answering your question. Yes, I think people are putting more space into their offices and separating people more, and employing a sort of phased approach to work, where you might have certain teams come in on one day of the week and you have like a rotation going. I am seeing a lot of that. I don't know if people who are listening have employed that in their workplace. I'd be interested to know. I'm actually doing a talk this evening on there's a group called Women in Office Design, can you believe? There's a group there. And it's talking about, the furniture industry in a little bit more depth. But I am interested to know if people generally feel that we'd like to get a bit more back to work and back to normal, or if they feel the working from home is working for them. I'm asking the question now.
I've asked a similar question, because for my sins, I do quite a lot of lease renewal work for tenants and offices. And at the moment, I have one client who are out of their offices and are being told by HQ that they will not be allowed into the summer of next year.
Whoa.
I know. I've got another client who's they're in occupation. We look after an office building for a client, and the tenant desperately wants to be in occupation because, like you, Eve, they cannot function without interaction on a regular, but very regular, minute-by-minute basis. Whereas there are others, like we are, for example, I can quite happily work almost anywhere, provided it's comfortable and I've got reasonable light and a decent PC screen. So I'm very interested to know whether we think that, in the same way that Amazon has done it for retail, whether COVID is doing it for offices. I hope to goodness it isn't, but certainly at the moment it feels like home working for some people is pretty beneficial. So what I'm trying to drive at is, will people want to use as much office space as they have in the past? It's very difficult to know quite what the answer is.
Oh, Lucy, you're on. You need to unmute.
Sorry. Can I answer that from a Cambridge Building Society perspective? Because what we've talked about this morning is that there's not one right answer for every person, given abilities or neurodiversity. And the same is true of offices or businesses. Not one answer is right for everyone. At the Cambridge, we normally have 125 people in our head office. We, for a few months, were running with a skeleton staff of around 5 to 10 of those essential people that we had to have in our office space. And we're now running at around 34 people, complying with that social distancing requirement. But we went out and asked every one of those people what their preference was. We've actually defaulted to, if you're not in the office now, continue working from home until the new year, being mindful of people wanting to be extra careful around Christmas time and visiting friends and relatives and not being exposed to additional risk beforehand and also not bringing back additional risk afterwards. The majority of people preferred to have that security that they knew the arrangement would be they're at home until New Year. But a lot of people, and the crux of your question about will people want to come back and get back to normal, the crux of it is people are really missing that normal, but it's not normal. So coming back to the office now, I think for people who understand that it doesn't look like it used to, there's not the same social interaction, there's not the same the buzz or the kind of vibrancy that used to be there. So people aren't missing that, people are missing what used to be, and that's not available whether you're back at the office or not just now. But I think for me, the heart of it is there's not one right answer, and you need to go and speak to and understand individual preferences.
Yes, I agree with that. And if you're bringing new people into an organisation, and you say welcome on the first morning, you're working at home, well, they have no sense of the organisation they're working for. They don't make relationships. They don't talk over the water cooler to understand how people function, do stuff within the organisation, do stuff outside the organisation. It's impossible. So it's hard to imagine that offices are going to disappear, but I think they're useful change.
We've prioritised space for some of those people who are new starters and the people that need to train them. So the space that we do have available whilst maintaining the COVID distancing, we've said, look, if you're struggling to work from home for a practical reason or an emotional mental health reason, or you just need that time with some of your team members to come in and do something collaboratively, then we will seek to accommodate that in a safer way as possible. So it's being very much demand-led, which I feel is the right thing to do and comfortable with. But you know, nothing is completely without risk. So it's that balance for people, isn't it? You're right, for new starters, for building that sense of belonging to the organisation, understanding the organisation, what it looks like, and getting to know colleagues. You know, those first few weeks are really, really important.
Yeah, vital. I agree with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, Heather's just pointed out on Zoom, it's much easier to have a Zoom meeting with people you've met than for meeting with for the first time. So, yeah, absolutely. Do we have any more questions anywhere? No, I can't see any more questions just at the moment. What I will say is thank you very, very much to Eve for doing that talk for us. It certainly does, it makes you think really about what we would like to get back to, and also our working practices and the flexibility of working practices and humans, the sort of human-centered design in that, which I think is a good thing. But yes, it would be nice to go back into the office once or twice a week, maybe not 5 days. Yeah. But that's just what suits me personally. But no, thank you. It's really interesting, and I think it just seems that there's no easy answer at the moment. What I can do is everybody is to share Eve's presentation. She's allowed us to do that, so we'll send that out to you later. Is there anything else people would like to say before we sign off?
No, thank you. Very good.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your questions and for interaction as well, which I think is always good. And thank you very much, Eve, for your talk, which was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Welcome. People are saying thanks. Bye, everybody. We've been
Thanks,
recording
bye.
this, I should say, and it will be on our YouTube channel later. We'll send you the link.
Tweet about it or share it with anyone. If there's
Excellent. Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.